بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قول معروف ومغفرة خير من صدقة يتبعها أذى والله غني حليم.
الحمد لله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. I've been asked to speak to you this evening about how El-Hajj Malik Shabazz, also known as Malcolm X, impacted my life as he did the lives of millions throughout the world. And also how, through his influence, I made some choices in my life, I think, that changed the way I began to think. Because through Malcolm, I began to, he encouraged to really educate yourself. And rethink the value system that you're so much accustomed to. He encouraged me to really understand your history, to understand the value of God and all of those things. And I think it's important before swimming into those oceans of thought, so to speak, about getting right into how he influenced me. I think it's important for me to tell you a little bit about my past. Growing up in the South, in the state of Mississippi, where I'm from, and anybody knows a little bit about the history of the South, it has a brutal and racist history. And, growing up in that environment, images have a profound effect on how you see things and how you think. And, when I was younger, I didn't know that statistically, I had a better chance at becoming a doctor or a lawyer. Statistically, I thought, for me, growing up, that basketball was the best option that I had because I felt I was talented, I was athletic. And so at an early age, I put a lot of weight on my shoulders to try to be the best I could. And there were times when I really didn't want to train, but I felt this was all I had for myself. And so I would wake up like 4 o'clock in the morning, and it's still dark outside, and I'm like putting the whole weight of my family on my shoulders as an 8, 9-year-old. And I would go out, and it didn't matter if it was raining, it didn't matter. I'm talking about thunder and lightning. It didn't matter if it was freezing outside. It didn't matter if it was 100 degrees outside. I mean, I would wake up, and I would wake up, and literally I would imagine. And again, there were days I didn't want to do it. And my mother for years didn't know I was doing this. I would wait because she had to be at work at 5 o'clock, so I would wait until she left. And then I'm on my way, and we had 3 basketball courts in different directions. And I would go up and down as I'm going to one of the courts, and I usually pick the one closest to the beach because I love the water. But I would imagine myself playing against this invisible person because in that young age, I realized, you know what? And everywhere I went, and every time I dribbled or shot the ball on my way to this gym, he was this close, hitting the ball. And I'm trying to move as fast as I can, trying to beat my imagination, because at that young age, I'm saying, well, if I can beat my imagination, nobody can stay with me like your imagination can. So I would train like this day in and day out. And again, I would wake up, and there were times I literally thought I was going to die on the basketball court because I just expended that much energy. And there were days I would be putting on my shoes, and I would hear the rain coming down so hard, and the lightning, you could, pow! I mean, you could hear it, but it didn't matter. I was putting on my shoes. I just wanted it that bad. And I kept training and training by the grace and mercy of Allah. I went through elementary school, and I'm going to cut through this real quick to get to my point. I went through elementary school, averaging a lot of points, and I didn't know where my career was going to take me. I really didn't. But one thing I was taught when I was younger, the belief in prayer, and when you pray for something, move in the direction of your prayer, and you have a better chance of succeeding. And so I would pray, And I would constantly, and I didn't always pray for myself. I would pray for others. That was big for me. I wanted to be in a position someday to help someone, to benefit someone. And so I would constantly, day in and day out, I would pray, but I would move. And the more I did that, Allah began to open doors for me. I was in elementary, and there were moments when the score would be 42 to 40, 43 to 46, and I would have 42 of our 43 points. 36 to 42, I would have all 36. And so I began to open doors. I go to junior high school. I'm playing for the ninth grade all 3 years, starting, averaging, leading scorer. Go to high school. Before I hit a high school game, I'm number one in the state on the first team before I even touch a basketball. So I'm like, wow, doors are beginning to open. I go to college, recruited from all over the world. All over the nation. And I remember a journalist asking me, he said, what do you want your career to say for itself when it's over? I said, if I could, and I was being humble. I was thinking big, but I wanted to be reasonable in my answer. I said, if I can average 13.7 assists a game, I think that'll be great. Because I'm thinking I'm going to be playing against 6'5", 6'6", guards, stronger, quicker. So my first game, I had about 13 and 7. It's okay. Second game, I had 21. Coach Brown pulled me to the side, coming into the locker room. He said, look, we need you to score more. I said, Coach, I'll try. Third game, I had 48. I'm a freshman. Fourth game, 36. And now the fifth game, national televised game, we're playing against Florida. In Florida. At the end of the game, I had ended up with 53 points. Come out for the interview. They give me a standing ovation. And I'm terrified. I get on the bus, and I'm crying like a baby because I said, this is happening too fast. I know something's going to happen to me. Plane going to crash. I'm going to get hit by a car. This ain't supposed to happen like this. And so we get into, I'm on the bus, and I'm crying. Please, God, forgive me. I'm asking God to forgive me for scoring 53 points. I'm sorry. I didn't mean it. And so I'm on the bus, and I'm crying. I'm like, it so happened that night, the plane, normally planes do this when they hit that air pocket. This night, the plane was doing this. It was shaking. You had people on the plane. Yeah, shut up. I was mad. Be quiet, man. I'm taking this serious. We might crash. So I get back home. We land safely. I get back, and I'm so close in telling Dale Brown, I said, look, I don't know if I want to play anymore. I was contemplating, said, look, I just want to play home games. I don't want to fly anymore. But I sucked it up eventually, and I ended up continuing playing, and some great things eventually happened to me. But what I'm trying to say is, as a young boy growing up, and I grew up in a single-parent home. My mother had an 8th grade education. And even though she encouraged us to be educated, I want you to get an education, there's only so much she can give us. Because it's only so much you can give a person that you yourself don't have. Even though she desired to give us that. In terms of, in a practical sense, sitting around and dealing with issues and flirting with ideas and coming up with solutions and trying to teach you how to be a critical thinker, that wasn't the case in our home. So because of that, at a young age, I developed an inferiority complex. I felt I was inadequate. And that type of thinking followed me for a long time. To the point when I was in elementary school. Not elementary, junior high school. I was in class, she had a meeting with the principal. And we get into the office, and I didn't know anything about this. And he hit me. It was just a huge blow, especially to a young kid. And he tells my mother, well, he needs to be put in a special class. I said, oh, I'm a basketball player. I got a reputation. I got a little fame. Don't do that. And there's no offense to those people who need it, but I didn't feel I needed that. But my mother succumbed to it. She allowed them to put me in a class, and I was humiliated. And that type of thing, like I said, it kills sometimes your confidence. It kills the perception that you have of yourself. And for a long time, this is the way I thought, that and I would take my anger and I would take my frustration out on people on the basketball court, because that was my domain. You talk crazy, you think this way. When you get on here, I'm trying to kill you. I'm trying to own you. But in other areas of my life, I didn't have that same confidence because of the environment I grew up in. You know, growing up in that environment, even growing up in the ghettos of the South, you see things. And images have a profound effect on how you perceive yourself and how you think later on. You know, even neighborhoods we grew up in, it was just really economically depressed. I mean, it seems like everybody in the neighborhood was a paycheck away from living on the street. Aesthetically, it was unappealing. I mean, smelly, old, poorly built homes, more dirt in the yard than grass, trash all over the place, prostitution, I mean, teenage sex, matter of fact, elementary sex. I mean, I remember being in elementary school, and I'm sitting in school, I'm not going to mention his name, and I'm watching this sixth grader approach a substitute teacher. And he was very mature for his age, too mature. He knew too much for his age, too confident. And I'm sitting here watching him flirt with this substitute teacher. And I'm seeing that she's getting excited. And a part of me was repulsed by it. But the sad thing is that also, almost simultaneously, a part of me was excited. And I'm questioning, why am I excited? Because I'm thinking, what repulsed me was, what if that was my mother? You know, that he's trying to hit on. And me seeing her excited, and this young sixth grader. And so, you know, you're battling with these emotions and these feelings. It's like, okay, you know that's inappropriate, but yet I'm also why am I feeling sexually excited? I'm a sixth grader. And as I think about it now that I'm older, and also in junior high school, principal calls us one day, me and a couple of students. We go to, he says, look, I need you to help me to get something out of this equipment room. It's right off the art room, literally like this. The hall is right there, the door's right there. We go, and I'm right on the principal's tail. He opens the door. We look down. There's a boy and a girl in the act. There's one that ducked underneath a mattress that was sitting catty corner. And they looked, I mean, they were terrified, like a deer being hit with bright lights, you know, and he pushed me away. And so you grow up with these images, and then you know, even the television shows you watch, walking the street and you seeing little torn papers of pornographic material. And then you start thinking back like, wow, these things triggered these type of emotions, these type of feelings, you know, that I had. And so growing up in that environment, you know, like I said, all of those things. And then in your neighborhood, it seems that everybody in that neighborhood is black, that lives that way. And you can't put your finger on it at that young age, but you know something ain't right with this picture. But then 3 blocks up the street, right across the track, manicured lawns, nice homes, colorful, no police, no trash. But everybody in that community is white. And man, this has been going on for years. It's like you see the segregation, and you can't put your finger on it. So at a young age, you grow up, and these images have a profound effect. It's like James Baldwin once said. He said, children have never truly been good at listening to their parents, but they've never failed imitating them. In other words, we gravitate more to what we see, you know, those experiences, those images, than what like Allah says in Quran, he says, why do you say that which you don't do? Hateful is it in the sight of God, Allah, that you say that which you don't do. Almost as if the saying and the doing are almost simultaneous. But he's saying, no, the doing precedes the saying, right? Because the old adage goes, actions speak louder than words, right? So it's as though God is saying that, you know, words have never validated action. Action has always validated or invalidated words. So, you know, you grow up, and for years, you know, I even go to college, and there's so many things that I didn't learn. I ended up memorizing my way through school. You know what I mean? Because they say you need a C to pass. I just did enough, because anything else is going to take time away from basketball, so I'm just going to make a C. So, but when I got to college, they did a placement test. And oh my goodness, I was terrible. It was like, I was probably on junior high level. And those type of things, it just killed my confidence. And by the grace and mercy of God, when I was at LSU, my coach gave me the autobiography of Malcolm. And this shows the extent of my education, because even up to that point, I had never heard of who Malcolm was. Just like I had never heard of right down the street in Natchez, Mississippi, there was a guy named Abdul-Rahman, the Prince of Slaves, who was the son of a king in Timbuktu that was enslaved in Natchez, Mississippi. And the civilizations that they had at that time in Timbuktu, the colleges and the intellectualism that was going on, I didn't know. You're still working on the premise that, we are 3/5 man and we're, inferior and things of this nature. So he gave me the autobiography of Malcolm, and I began to read it. And it's an understatement to say that reading his book, because I grew up also in the South where I would see the Ku Klux Klan at that young age. I grew up in like 69. I was born in 1969. And I'm divulging my age a little bit. So I grew up like, I was born in the 1960s. I grew up like in the 70s and 80s. And, I used to see the Ku Klux Klan with their mask on, march up the beach, have access to marching up the beach. And they're a known terrorist organization, killing people. They had that access. And then you see Roots, the picture of Roots in these images. I read the biography, alhamdulillah, I read the biography of Malcolm, and his life really, it touched me tremendously. And just how thought-provoking he was as an individual, how he articulated his ideas, how he was courageous, in his position and his stand. And this was something, even as a child, I wanted to be. But I didn't feel I could be. Why? Because growing up, again, as I'm saying these images, I would grow up and I would see how my mother and my uncles and people around, how they would confront whites. And it would almost be like in a subservient way, a submissive way, yes. When they get behind their back, that mother, And I would see this day in and day out. And sometimes what happens, even if you don't want to, what happens, you end up doing what you see. Like James Baldwin said, never failed in imitating what they see. So for years, I would be afraid to say what was on my mind. And I would feel when I had to confront someone, whether they were white or black, I would get nervous. I was like, I don't want to feel this. This is not natural to feel this. Well, you should be able to say what you want to say with no problem. And this is the way I felt growing up for many years. And so at some point, I had to, I have to break these chains. And the book of Malcolm came right on time. And so I began to read his book. And I went through some changes because Malcolm was first in the Nation of Islam. And the Nation of Islam, with the whole black man is God, white man is the devil. I'm coming out the South, images I'm seeing. Yeah, that's right. Really, I was going through that transition. Like Allah says, everything's in stages. So, nobody knew it, but I was an undercover racist. Now I look at you, that's the way I was because I'm looking, yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. Well, wheat bread is better than white bread, all that type of philosophy, right? Like, yeah, when the black man, yeah, So I'm going through this thing, but I knew deep down in my heart, that wasn't right. And so I'm going through these stages, and for the longest, before that, it was like, and I still felt nervous. And I said, after reading his book and looking how he was just fearless, it seemed. It didn't matter where he was. His thing was being sincere with the truth. And let the chips fall where they may, as he would say, by any means necessary. And live with the consequences. And the more I read and the more I thought, I began to say, wow, I began to develop confidence. And actually, he encouraged me to read more because seeing how his mind was, he was just so prolific in his thought. It's like, man, this man, he's very learned. And so, when you read books, sometimes the author in the book will mention another author. You like him, you're going to go get him. So before you know it, I started having a little library. And that library, I began to read, and I began to gain some confidence, because my knowledge base began to increase a little bit. And so now here it is, I go to the NBA. And all that time I've been searching, because I grew up in a Christian background. And so I was searching. Something wasn't right for me. And so all of this time, I'm struggling and I'm searching. So I get to the NBA, and I haven't finished the book yet. I haven't finished Malcolm's book. And so I'm reading this book, and by chance I meet this priest, because we were talking. He had a protege named Mark James, and we became close. And one day at my house, Islam came up in conversation. I said, "You interested in Islam?" He said, "Yeah, I'm interested." He said, "Man, I met this brother named Abdullah. We can go to the masjid and pick up the Quran." I said, "Okay." Got in the car. We rushed down, went to the masjid, picked up the Quran, came back. I opened 2-3 pages later. For me, it was just, it answered everything for me. And I remember looking up at him across the table. I said, "I don't know about you, but I'm going to be a Muslim. That's it for me." And I was so pleased and at peace at that moment. So I began to read. And I began to read people like Howard Zinn, Noam Chomsky, Gore Vidal. Just a whole, and I'm reading about what's going on in America and how they're involved in so many wars. Like almost every war that's generated in the world, it seems like they're involved with it, like they have their hands in it somehow. And so I'm sitting here and I'm learning things that I never heard before. So I developed a distaste privately for not standing for the flag. I just couldn't do it. And I did this for months at a time until the assistant GM came to me. And he said, "Somebody caught wind of the fact that you're not standing." He said, "Would you like to get your story out?" I said, "I don't mind talking to anybody. It doesn't matter." So he set up a little small interview, and it caught wind. I have practice the next day. We're playing against Shaquille O'Neal when he's with the Orlando Magic. The media, we have practice the next day. Before that game, the media comes in. And right after practice, they jam me up. And they say, "Well, what do you think about the flag?" And I thought the statement I said, I thought what I said was balanced. I said, "Look, I think it's a symbol of tyranny and oppression." But I said, am I saying that everything in America is bad? No, there's good that exists. But wherever the bad is, even if it's as a Muslim, even if it's in Saudi Arabia, as a Muslim, we don't stand for it. I thought that was very balanced. Wherever it is, we don't stand. But yes, it does represent that. The next thing you know, it was all over the news. My character was being assassinated. I was a troublemaker all of a sudden. This and this and that. So I come to the game the next day. When I walk in, the manager tells me, he says, "Bernie wants to see you down in the office." It's okay, no problem. I go down, and Bernie sits there, and he says, "They're going to suspend you if you don't stand. What's your position?" I said, "I can't. Do what you got to do." He says, "Well, 2 people at the NBA want to talk to you." I said, "No problem." Put them on the phone. And so they began to talk, and they identified themselves as Jewish. And again, there's nothing wrong with that at all. But they began to try to impose, I guess, their belief and their opinion on me, trying to convince me to stand. And I was on a little roll by that time, because prior to that happening, I ended up having a meeting with my attorney, my agent at the time, because reading Malcolm, kind of fires you up. And I said, I got to break these. I got to start saying what's on my. I got to get out of this feeling of being nervous. I hate that feeling. This ain't natural. I should be able to say what I want to say, which eventually led up to that. All of this little lifestyle that I had of having an inferiority complex, of feeling inadequate, but of knowing that there was better, knowing that, man, there's a better way of doing things. It just, all of that ended up reaching to that point. So I ended up meeting my agent, and I sat down with him, because he would always call me son. And I was offended by that after a while. It was euphemism for boy. This is what I'm thinking, right? And then he would talk about his son more than me in these meetings, while he was trying to convince the Denver Nuggets to take me, so to speak. So I had a meeting with him, and I just went straight to the jugular vein. I said, I called this meeting with you, Mr. Miller, because I have a few things I want to tell you. I said, listen, I said, when we sit in these meetings, the first thing, I said, don't ever refer to me as son again. I was still nervous, but I had to get over it. I said, don't ever refer to me as son again. I said, the only person that can call me son is my mother who raised me, who was my mother and my father. I said, I don't like it. It's first name basis with you and I. And I said, furthermore, I said, I don't work for you, you work for me. And I said, when we go into these meetings, you have a job to represent me, not to talk about your son. Right? So is this the little boy that I used to give tennis shoes to and take with me, to play basketball, AAU? And then he said, well, son, and I kind of, he said, Mahmoud, and start talking. At that point, I read something. A little after that, I read something that Bernie Bickerstaff said, well, he needs to stop BSing and play ball. I'm on the road now. Hey, Bernie, how you doing? This is the general manager. Hey, Mahmoud, what's going on? Hey, yeah, everything's fine. But look, I just saw an article in the paper where you were talking about, me saying, you need to stop being, well, he blew up. Who you think you talking to, calling me? I said, look, man, I don't care who you are, what your position is. I ain't some handkerchief head nigga you think I am. This is what I told him. And I said, I don't care if I never played the game again. I play it because I love it. He hung up on me. So I go back to the gym, and we see each other, distance. He looks at me. He does this. I do that. And that was it. But the whole year, I noticed that the respect was different. He would go and play with other people. He'd come to see me. How you doing, Mama? That's good. All right. And so it got to the point where here it is. I'm on this, I'm talking to these people, and they wanted to suspend me. So I said, I can't see myself doing it. I can't. And so they ended up suspending me. And I was so naive that after we finished the conversation, I said, well, can I go get dressed now? Because I'm thinking the suspension going to take 3, 4, 5 days before. He said, no, you're suspended now. I said, now? Because I'm getting ready to go thinking I'm going to play the Orlando Magic. And then I said, okay, well, can I dress and can I go watch the game? He said, no, you can't even be on the premises. It's okay. And so make a long story short, Larry King, a lot of people were calling, and I was so frustrated and I was so upset because people were lying. They were lying about my character. They was really trying to dig me in, just put me under. And I remember talking to this brother, Muhammad Al-Asi, because I was ready to go on and just say what I felt. And he made a point. He said, just your choice. He said, but he gave me an example of the prophet. He said, you can stand, or you don't have to stand. He said, or you could stand, but it not be for that cause. And he gave me an example of the prophet at a funeral procession. And as the funeral procession passed, these were people that they were at war with. And some of his companions stood up. He stood up. And his companion, they said, what are you standing for? We fight these people, they fight us. He says, I'm not standing because of these people. I'm standing because God gave a life and he took a life away. So that's what compelled me to come back. But after that, it was, the whole compromising thing. So I never compromised my beliefs. I still believe the same way. I still believe that there's major issues in this country. I still believe it's a symbol of oppression and tyranny. I'm not going to change that. But, in Islam, if you see a better way, you do that. And it goes on to where years later, I wasn't able to get back into the NBA. A lot of people felt I was blackballed because of that. And I was able to sneak back in after about 2-3 years of absence in Vancouver, Canada. And right after that, 9/11 happens. And I'm now at that point in my life, where I don't want to play the game no more. It is what it is. If there's something I feel I got to say, I'm going to say. I'm not trying to be a savior. I'm not trying to present myself as a scholar. If there's something, because I've held back for so many years, things that you feel, things you want to say, and then all of a sudden, some people live their whole life, and at the end of their life, they're miserable because deep down they know they were cowards. They know they didn't have the guts to stand up. And I said, I don't want to live like that. I don't want to live like that anymore. So they came to me, and I'm going to conclude in a minute. They came to me. And usually when reporters interview you, they start you off warm you up. Hey, how's your family doing? Blah, 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 blah. And his name was Bernard Goldberg. And he came down like 2-3 days earlier. But before that, they had someone calling you to prep you for the interview to see if it's worth having. So I was careful this time. I was giving the guy just enough to make him excited about interviewing me, but not everything. So when they came to interview me, he finally sits down. And the first question he asked me, we're sitting down, he says, so, do you think bin Laden did it? Like, wow. Now, I got 1 more year to go on my contract. It's their option. I just got back into the league. So I look at him, and I gave him my answer. And from there, at the time I told him, I said no. But if he did do it, he had help. And then I started giving him a lot of little different scenarios of what I'd been reading in open press magazines and newspapers that they're not presenting in mainstream media. And for about 3 times, he cut the interview off. He went out and cursed this guy out because you told me this, you told me that. But I wasn't giving him those answers. And we went from the burning my house down in Mississippi. They put Ku Klux Klan insignia on the house. I mean, we were trying to build a house on 53 acres to develop a community so people could move there, raise our own livestock and everything. So someone ended up burning that down. We went from there to the flag issue, went from the flag to 9/11. And, I mean, I just didn't want to play. I was just giving it to him. I was throwing everything at him that I could. And where you getting your information from? And I knew if I would have told him, the Crescent International or whatever, Muslim publication, he was, there was a biased material. So I gave him other information. He shut up. And at the end of it all, they butchered it as usual. Made it look just terrible. Even some kids from D.C. at a school, they sent a whole bunch of letters. I'm talking about elementary students. I was impressed. They sent a whole bunch of letters to me, and they literally, they weren't even sitting in the interview, but they wrote where they thought the interview was chopped, and they were so accurate. Man, they were accurate. And so after that, my career it ended. And I'm saying all of this to say, I know I'm talking about my life, but we're here talking about Malcolm. If it wasn't for Malcolm, El Hajj Malik Shabazz, I wouldn't be where I'm at today, because I would have never thought that I would be sitting up in an audience, one, throwing my notes away, you know what I mean, but talking to a crowd, because I didn't even have the courage to do that when I was younger. I mean, even going through from college, even parts of the NBA. So it's because of him and because of what he stood for, his values, his principles, his strength, how he articulated ideas, is why I'm here today. And I'm very grateful. Sometimes, and we were talking about this earlier, sometimes, too, we don't realize the strength that we have, the power that we have, and how one individual can make a difference. Just like we look at Malcolm, he's still affecting lives to this day. He was one individual that impacted the lives of millions. And we can do the same thing. And it reminds me of a story about starfish. Some of you may have heard it, and we talked about this earlier. There was this little girl walking down the beach, and she saw thousands of starfish kicked out of the ocean, and they were being baked by the heat of the sun. And so she began to pick them up and throw them in the ocean. And at that moment, there was an older gentleman. He said, little girl, what are you doing? There are thousands of starfish. You can't possibly make a difference. She got discouraged. So she put them down. Moments later, she reached down and picked it up, threw it back into the ocean. He said, little girl, what are you doing? I told you you can't possibly make a difference. She said, I made a difference with that one. So he was so influenced that he began to help her. So as they threw the starfish back into the ocean, they would say, I made a difference with that one. Other people heard. They came together. All of them began to throw starfish back into the ocean. And as they threw, all of them said, I made a difference with that one. Until moments later, there was no more sound. She looked around, all the starfish were gone. So it illustrates how one person, being sincere with God's help, can affect change, can make a difference, just like a Malcolm did. And what Malcolm was doing, like one of the brothers mentioned earlier about trying to make it less of a civil rights issue and more of a human rights issue because it's more global. It involves, when we look at our struggle as a global struggle, and not a localized struggle, we can get more done. That reminds me of a story about this anthropologist who created this game among African children. And I'm going to really conclude with this one, I think. I might have one more. He created this game among African children where he put fruit in a basket, and he put it at a distance. And he said, whichever one of you can reach that tree could have the fruit to themselves. So they all grabbed hands, and they ran together. When they got to the tree, they ate as one. So the anthropologist was surprised because he thought that this tendency of selfishness and greed and individualism was going to come to the forefront. But it didn't. So he asked them, he said, why did you do that? They said, Ubuntu. They said, how could one be happy when the rest of us are sad? They said, Ubuntu is a philosophy among African tribes that I am because we are. And if we have that philosophy, just like Malcolm, when he said, look, it doesn't matter, you know, your color, religion, or whatever, we have a common goal. You know, when we have this mindset, we can definitely get more accomplished. And I hope that we can get that. It's like, and really understanding the value of time, because time is one thing that we can't get back when we're gone. It's like Alexander. This is my last story. Alexander the Great on his deathbed, he called 3 of his generals to his bed, and he said, look, I have 3 wishes that I want you to fulfill for me once I'm dead. I said, what is it? He said, I want the best doctors to carry my coffin. I want all the wealth that I've acquired to be spread over the burial ground. And I want my hands to be exposed. And they thought this was strange. He said, why? He said, I want the people to know that in the time of death, not even the best doctors can restore your health. And I want them to know that whatever you gain in this world, when you leave it, it remains on this earth. And I want them also to know that you come into this world barehanded and you're going to leave barehanded. You can accumulate wealth, you can accumulate all those things, but you can never accumulate time once it's gone. So value it and take it seriously. May Allah bless you. Thank you very much.